You know what I realized in that moment? In that moment, I realized that I was trying to be something that I was never intended to be in order to have something I was never intended to have. So much in the planting process, we get started with this understanding and this idea of who God is and who He's called us to be. And we have these blueprints and we're excited and we're confident and we know what God has called us to do. And then all of a sudden we step out and we don't see the results in the timetable that we desired to see Him in, not realizing that everything has been made beautiful in God's timing and not yours.
The pressure of leading a church just like him. I've got to preach like him. I've got to do meetings just like our leader. And the first couple of years, honestly, it was a bit of a stretch for me.
Some of you have succumbed to the lie. Maybe God brought me here to tell you, you need to stop believing the lie. And you need to start believing the voice of the one who is and the one who is to come. That you are a conqueror in Christ Jesus. That greater is He who is in you than he who is in the world. So maybe you need to shake some things off, baby, so that you can step into everything that God has called you to step into.
We were so fortunate and blessed to be sent out by another church, large church, fantastic leader, and I felt so grateful for that. But to be really honest, I felt very intimidated by that. I remember coming into our setting thinking, man, I've got to be just like that leader. I've got to preach like him. I've got to lead our teams like him. Boy, if only we could have an all staff, just like their all staff. And it was around the 2-year mark that I realized God called me to this place, and I had to start stepping into the insecurity. I had to start stepping into the preaching, getting a word from God for His church. So I said, you know what, it's time that I stepped in to what God has put on me. And honestly, it wasn't easy. It was actually stepping into the insecurity. It was stepping into the uncomfortable. There was always something in the back of my head like, you're doing great, but it's not as great. And I was really intimidated, almost like nervous to step into that unknown gap between where I had come from and where I knew God was wanting to take our church. And the more I would step in and say, God, I'm gonna trust that you're on the other side of that. I'm gonna trust that as I step into the style that you gave me to preach, you're gonna be there and you're gonna be in it. And the biggest thing for me was even meetings. God, I'm gonna step into our staff meetings. I'm gonna step into our all staff meetings planned and ready and trust that you're on the other side of that. And it looks different than where I came from. But had I not stepped into the insecurity, we wouldn't have found our identity. My identity as a communicator, our identity as a staff. And it didn't happen immediately, but week after week of saying, God, I'm gonna trust you, the Lord began to build our confidence. Step into the insecurity and watch what God does on the other side of your faith and your step of obedience.
We don't start seeing the results we want to see, and we're comparing our chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20, and then all of a sudden we feel like we have to be somebody else and something else, and we start taking on all of these things. If I could just preach like that pastor, if I could just have LED screens like that church, if I could just have a full-time staff like that, if I could have this, then I would have that.